In the absolute silence of the distant past, the primordial magic flickers into existence, a sentient flame born from the void, screaming its ego into the emptiness. But even with all that power, the entity is trapped in a crushing, eternal isolation, drifting through the void with nothing but its own thoughts. And unable to bear the weight of its own solitude any longer, the primordial magic begins to warp reality, tearing through dimensions to manifest something new. Finally breaking the cycle of silence by excreting its own essence to forge the very first lifeform, the majestic and golden-scaled gold dragon. But this creation is a massive mistake, because the gold dragon is born with a sharp, predatory intelligence that immediately begins to size up its creator. And while the dragon possesses a brilliant mind, it is also fueled by a bottomless, toxic arrogance that blinds it to the consequences of its next move. So with a sickening display of greed, the beast lunges forward, opening its jaws to swallow the very source of its existence in one final, gluttonous act. And despite the warning that it shouldn't dare to consume such a force, the dragon gulps down the primordial magic, sealing its own fate in the process. But the victory is short-lived, because the moment the power is absorbed, the dragon's body begins to convulse under the sheer, uncontainable magnitude of that stolen energy. And as the dragon struggles to hold itself together, it realizes too late that it has bitten off far more than its physical form could ever hope to contain. The gold dragon, now bloated with stolen divinity, begins to leak pure, raw essence into the void, shedding the excess magic that it can no longer contain. And from these discarded droplets of power, two distinct forms coalesce in the darkness, birthing the red dragon and the blue dragon into existence. These two are polar opposites from the very second they open their eyes, staring each other down with an instinctive, primal hatred that defies explanation. And the moment their gazes lock, the tension snaps, forcing them into an immediate, violent collision as they scramble for dominance in this brand new reality, unleashing torrents of elemental fury that tear through the void, a chaotic war that would rage on for tens of thousands of years without a single moment of peace. While the gold dragon, exhausted by the sheer burden of its gluttony, drifts into a deep, uncaring slumber, leaving the world to be shaped by the carnage below. Because the constant, brutal impact of their magical warfare begins to solidify the very fabric of the void, grinding down into the jagged, physical foundations of the land. And from the residual energy of this endless conflict, a third entity emerges, the green dragon, rising up to join the fray and throwing the balance into total chaos. With the gold dragon still snoring away, the trio continues to dump their overflowing magic into the world, saturating the environment with unstable, volatile power. Until finally, the sheer density of this accumulated waste magic triggers a biological explosion, causing countless miscellaneous lifeforms to sprout and crawl across the newly formed Earth. After an eternity of silence, the gold dragon finally snaps its eyes open, the brilliant blue irises burning with a cold, calculating intelligence that signals the end of its slumber. And as it takes flight, soaring high above the landscape, the beast surveys the world below with a growing, visceral disgust at the sight of life it never authorized. Because the gold dragon views this entire reality as nothing more than a filthy, cluttered nest that needs to be scrubbed clean of all unauthorized existence. So it rallies its elven servants, positioning them at the vanguard of a brutal crusade to systematically exterminate the green dragon and the encroaching orc populations. And with a ruthless efficiency, the purge begins, as the dragon descends upon the land to erase every single lifeform that didn't sprout directly from its own divine essence. While miles away in a completely different reality, the tension of the Third World War's Northeast Asia front is shattered by a soldier who clearly has his priorities wrong. Because the platoon leader ignores the gravity of the mission entirely, shoving a photo of his daughter, Jai-Hai, into his subordinate's face with an unearned sense of pride. And he continues to ramble on, completely oblivious to the tactical briefing, insisting that bragging about his daughter is far more important than the lives at stake, even going so far as to shamelessly offer his subordinate a chance to be Jai-Hai's boyfriend, as if they aren't currently sitting in the middle of a high-stakes military operation. And when the deputy platoon leader finally tries to steer the conversation back to the mission, the platoon leader just waves him off, utterly lost in his own delusional world. The anonymous sergeant stares back, his stoic mask barely hiding the exhaustion of a soldier who has seen too much, as the platoon leader continues his relentless, rambling interrogation. And while the military transport rumbles through the dark, war-torn landscape, the platoon leader keeps pushing, clearly frustrated by his subordinate's rigid, by-the-book adherence to duty, demanding a straight answer about his intentions regarding his daughter, Jai-Hai, while the sergeant fumbles with his gear, admitting he is completely clueless when it comes to dating. But the platoon leader isn't letting up, sucking on a lollipop while he grills the kid about his life before the war, baffled by such a lack of personality. And he doesn't hold back the insults either, roasting the sergeant for being nothing more than a glorified trigger puller with zero social skills or hobbies to speak of. Leaning in with a cynical grin, the platoon leader wonders aloud if the kid was some kind of elite special forces operative before the world went to hell. While a small, curious lizard clings to the wall nearby, watching the bizarre exchange as the platoon leader presses for anything the sergeant might actually enjoy. And the sergeant, caught off guard by the sudden intensity, can only offer a blank stare and a vague admission of ignorance before being handed a digital device, where the platoon leader reveals his true, desperate motive, showing off photos, letters, and videos meant for his family, a final insurance policy for his own legacy. And finally dropping the act, he orders the sergeant to retreat to the rear, having already pulled strings with the commander to save the kid from a pointless death. The platoon leader offers one final, firm command to his subordinate, insisting that he find his own path and live for his own desires. And with that heavy directive hanging in the air, the scene violently shifts as a high-tech device slams into the earth with a thunderous, reality-warping impact. The mysterious mobile conduit skidding across the dirt like a fallen star, its glowing screen acting as a beacon for the carnage about to unfold. And as it settles, the device begins to hum with an unnatural, high-frequency energy that vibrates through the very ground, tearing a rift in the local space. Suddenly, a shimmering portal rips open, casting an ethereal light over the terrified orcs who realize too late that their sanctuary has been breached. And the air fills with the desperate, guttural cries of the orcs as they are caught in the crosshairs of a divine, genocidal fury. While the screen of the device flickers to life, displaying the brutal, real-time slaughter of the orcs by the gold dragon's relentless elven vanguard. And the orcs look up in absolute horror, witnessing the silhouette of the gold dragon descending from the heavens like a vengeful, winged god. The beast radiates a blinding, divine light that sears the night sky, signaling the absolute annihilation of everything that dares to exist without his permission. And with a final, crushing surge of magical pressure, the portal expands, sweeping across the battlefield and erasing the orcs in a flash of pure, cold destruction. The high-tech mobile device pulses with a blinding, ethereal light, its screen crackling with a surge of raw, anomalous energy that defies all logic. And the anonymous sergeant stands frozen in the downpour, his eyes widening as he realizes the sheer, impossible scale of the power he is now holding. While the weight of his new responsibility settles in, the sergeant looks down at the fallen platoon leader, his heart heavy with the grim reality of his command. He snaps out of his shock, barking orders to his remaining men to assess the damage and prepare for a desperate retreat toward the main force. But as he moves to secure the area, his boot strikes something hard against the mud, and he looks down to see the device lying discarded in the dirt. He reaches down to retrieve the conduit, his hands trembling slightly as the screen flickers, casting a ghostly glow across his masked, battle-hardened face. And as the display stabilizes, a digital image of the platoon leader and his family appears, a haunting reminder of the life that was just extinguished. The sergeant stares at the photo, his thumb hovering over the device as he recalls the leader's final, stubborn promise to bring every man home safely. He kneels beside the body of his commander, his voice thick with a quiet, iron-willed resolve as he refuses to abandon his post or retreat alone. And standing tall in the relentless rain, he clutches the device to his chest, swearing a silent oath to deliver this final, precious legacy no matter the cost. Under the cold, indifferent glow of the moon, a small lizard feasts in the shadows, completely unaware that the forest is about to become a slaughterhouse. And nearby, a desperate band of orcs rallies together, their glowing eyes burning with a frantic, singular purpose as they charge forward to save their kin. But the high elf warriors are already waiting, their magical archery striking with lethal precision as a glowing energy bolt pierces through the darkness to find its mark. And the lead orc collapses in agony, his leg shredded by the magical projectile, leaving him vulnerable and screaming in the dirt while his brothers scramble to defend him. The high elf commander watches the chaos with a look of pure, aristocratic disdain, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion at the sheer, unrefined nature of his prey. And he sneers at the struggling orcs, labeling them as nothing more than vermin defiling the sanctity of the forest, demanding that they simply accept their inevitable end. The skirmish erupts into a brutal, close-quarters brawl, with the high elf warriors moving with a fluid, terrifying grace that makes the orcs look like lumbering, clumsy beasts. And one orc, driven by a final, desperate surge of adrenaline, lunges forward with his axe, roaring in defiance as he tries to break the elven line. But the commander barely acknowledges the threat, flicking his wrist to manifest a shimmering barrier of force that effortlessly deflects the attack, dismissing the effort as utterly pathetic. And with a cold, predatory glint in his eyes, he draws back his bowstring, preparing to unleash a final, executioner's shot that will end the resistance for good. The green dragon descends like a vengeful storm, unleashing a torrent of raw emerald energy that blasts the high elf attackers away in a blinding flash of light. And as the smoke clears, the orcs stare up in absolute awe, realizing their protector has arrived just in time to prevent their total annihilation. The beast lands with a heavy, ground-shaking thud, his presence alone forcing the battlefield into a tense, momentary silence as he looms over his battered kin. But the victory comes at a cost, as the green dragon coughs up dark, viscous blood, his body clearly failing under the strain of his injuries. The orcs watch in terror, their faces twisted with panic as they realize their only hope for survival is wounded and struggling to maintain his form. He towers over them, his glowing eyes burning with a mix of fury and grim determination as he addresses the desperate, huddled survivors. He commands them to abandon the field immediately, his voice a low, rumbling growl that brooks no argument despite his obvious, agonizing pain. He spreads his massive, tattered wings, the emerald glow intensifying as he makes a solemn, world-shaking vow to his people. Standing tall as the self-proclaimed master of all things green, he roars his defiance into the night, swearing that this retreat is merely a tactical necessity. And with a final, hateful glare directed at the distant elven lines, he promises that they will return to reclaim their land from those arrogant knife-ears. The green dragon lets out a desperate, guttural roar, his eyes burning with a fierce, defiant promise that his people will eventually have their bloody revenge. But the gold dragon remains utterly unimpressed, sneering down at his wounded kin and mocking the grandiosity of such an oath coming from such an insignificant creature. And before the green dragon can even process the insult, the air around him begins to warp and shimmer with an overwhelming, suffocating magical pressure. Suddenly, a concentrated beam of pure, destructive energy erupts from the void, slamming into the green dragon with enough force to send him reeling backward. The impact leaves the green dragon staggering, his scales scorched and his body shuddering as he struggles to remain upright while his followers watch in absolute terror. Then the gold dragon descends from the heavens like a golden comet, his massive horned silhouette blotting out the sky as he prepares to finish the job. He crashes into the earth with a cataclysmic shockwave, pinning the green dragon beneath his weight and asserting his absolute tyrannical dominance over the battlefield. The gold dragon leans in close, his voice dripping with condescending venom as he labels the green dragon the lowest, most pathetic husk of all his creations. The orcs look on in paralyzed horror, realizing that the legendary gold dragon has finally arrived to personally oversee the total erasure of their existence. And as the green dragon gasps for air, desperately questioning the right of his creator to bring such ruin, the gold dragon simply erupts into a chilling, maniacal laugh. The gold dragon looms over his creation, his glowing eyes radiating a terrifying, godlike authority as he declares himself the true primordial. And he towers above the broken green dragon, his massive silhouette casting a shadow of absolute despair over the forest's final defender. While the gold dragon continues his arrogant tirade, claiming to be the only source of truth and righteousness in a world he deems beneath him. And he turns his gaze toward the encroaching high elf warriors, mocking their struggle as he views their entire dimension as nothing more than a pathetic, darkened wasteland. His golden crest flares with blinding, celestial energy, the sheer intensity of his power distorting the very air as he prepares to purge the filth he despises. The green dragon attempts one final, defiant retort, spitting out his hatred for the gold dragon's insufferable pride and toxic, glowing vanity. But the gold dragon merely smiles, his expression cold and detached as he treats the green dragon's dying words like a trivial, fleeting nuisance. He begins to channel a lethal, concentrated sphere of magical annihilation, offering a mock prayer for the green dragon to find peace in the void. And with a sudden, violent discharge of raw, purple-hued destruction, he unleashes a blast that tears through the fabric of reality itself, leaving the green dragon to collapse into the darkness, his life force spilling out as he utters a final, bitter curse against his creator. The green dragon lies curled in the darkness, his mind haunted by the devastating realization that he lacks the raw, elemental fury of the red dragon. And as he wallows in his own perceived inadequacy, he laments the absence of the blue dragon's cold, calculated intellect, feeling utterly lost in his own weakness. He stares at the glowing egg in his grasp, mourning the lost opportunity for vengeance against a pride that defies the very laws of space and time. The egg pulses with a faint, rhythmic light as he holds it, a fragile vessel of potential that feels heavy with the weight of his failure. Meanwhile, the reality of the Third World War grinds on, shifting the focus to the bleak, fortified trenches of the Northeast Asia front. Inside a cramped, dimly lit bunker, a small, mysterious lizard creature snacks on a worm, oblivious to the high-stakes tension surrounding its caretaker. Legion carefully tends to his secret companion, using tweezers to feed the creature while maintaining his stoic, battle-hardened composure. The silence is broken when a comrade enters, calling out to the deputy platoon leader and snapping Legion out of his private moment. He quickly hides the lizard away, his movements sharp and practiced as he acknowledges the report that the maintenance work is finally complete. Legion stands up, adjusting his gear with a cold, professional gaze, ready to head out and face the brutal reality of the front lines. The tension in the bunker reaches a breaking point as a soldier emerges from the shadows, his rifle raised and his presence signaling an immediate, unwanted interruption. And the group finds themselves confronted by the sudden arrival of the deputy platoon leader, whose cold, masked gaze cuts through the confusion like a blade. The atmosphere thickens as the soldiers identify the young refugee boy, who stands trembling with his meager trade goods, looking entirely out of place in this hellscape. While the boy clutches his items with white-knuckled desperation, his faithful white dog standing guard at his side, sensing the hostility radiating from the armed men. The boy holds out his hands, offering his pathetic scraps in a futile attempt to barter for survival, his eyes wide with the raw fear of a child caught in a war zone. But the deputy platoon leader remains unmoved, his posture rigid and his voice a sharp, cutting command that leaves absolutely no room for negotiation or mercy. He reaches out with a gloved hand, grabbing the boy by the shoulder with a brutal, dismissive force that sends a shockwave of panic through the small group. And he begins to march the boy away, ignoring the protests of his comrades as he drags the civilian toward the exit with a terrifying, mechanical efficiency. The remaining soldiers watch in stunned silence, whispering among themselves about the deputy's chilling lack of empathy, labeling him a heartless machine devoid of any human warmth. While the boy and his dog are shoved back into the darkness, leaving the others to wonder if the man they serve is even human anymore, or just another monster forged by the endless, grinding gears of war. The soldier's hand grips the refugee boy's shoulder with a sudden, jarring force, pulling him into the harsh reality of their immediate danger. And the boy recoils in pure, unadulterated terror, his eyes wide and frantic as he realizes that his attempt to trade has been cut short by a looming threat. While the soldier holds out his hands, displaying the meager supplies they've managed to scrape together, a grim testament to the scarcity of their existence. He acknowledges that without the deputy platoon leader's ruthless efficiency, none of them would have lasted long enough to see another sunrise in this hell. The boy looks up, his voice trembling as he questions the past of the man who leads them, wondering what kind of life forged such a cold, calculated warrior. And the soldier stares back, his eyes hidden behind a mask, contemplating the enigma of their leader while the weight of the war presses down on them. Suddenly, the conversation is shattered by the mechanical whine of an incoming threat, as a surveillance drone descends from the sky like a predatory insect. The camera lens of the drone locks onto them with a terrifying red-hued focus, signaling that their position has been compromised and the hunt is on. The soldier snaps into action, barking desperate orders to dive into the trenches as the air fills with the chaotic, high-pitched hum of the enemy. And with the boys scrambling for cover and the call for buckshot echoing through the bunker, the unit turns to face the incoming slaughter head-on. The battlefield erupts into a frantic, high-stakes scramble as the unit screams for the deputy platoon leader to watch his back. But the warning barely registers over the deafening roar of combat, the air thick with the metallic tang of ozone and impending doom. Legion locks his sights on the incoming threat, his eyes burning with a cold, lethal focus as he prepares to unleash hell. And with a rhythmic, thunderous sequence of gunfire, he tears through the air, shielding his comrades from the encroaching, mechanical nightmare. The enemy drone is shredded in midair, its circuits sparking and frame collapsing as a well-placed grenade finishes the job in a flash of fire. But the violence triggers a haunting memory, pulling Legion back to a simpler time when his hands were stained with nothing but the gentle care of a pet shop, where he once spent his days feeding tiny, fragile creatures, finding a quiet, profound joy in the simple act of nurturing life. He remembers the soft, rhythmic movements of his former life, a stark contrast to the cold, calculated efficiency of his current, blood-soaked existence. And as he carries a fallen comrade through the mud, the weight of his duty feels like a crushing, inescapable burden that mocks his past. Because even as he stands tall to receive the hollow honors of war, he knows that no amount of medals can ever replace the peace he lost. The truth finally hits home as the soldier realizes his entire existence has been a lie, his eyes welling with tears as the weight of his reality crashes down. He desperately reaches out, his hand grasping at the air as if trying to snatch back the simple, quiet life he once cherished before the war consumed him. He reflects on the days spent in the pet shop, finding solace in the perfectly useless but undeniably adorable creatures that once filled his world with meaning. His hand trembles as he holds the mysterious object, his gaze locked onto the artifact with a mix of fear and a primal, desperate hunger to survive. The object feels heavy in his grip, a strange, pulsating weight that seems to hum with an ancient, forbidden energy that defies all military logic. He collapses to his knees, his body racked with the sheer exhaustion of a man who has been pushed past his breaking point by the relentless grind of war. His breath hitches as he stares down, his mind racing to process the impossible nature of the item he is clutching to his chest. He narrows his eyes, a sudden cynical realization dawning on him as he mutters that the supposed weapon is nothing more than a dud. He sits in the darkness, cradling the glowing, egg-like relic as if it were the most precious thing in the world, his posture reflecting a newfound, eerie calm. And as the voice of the forest echoes in his mind, claiming dominion over the shadows, he remains kneeling, a lone soldier holding the key to power he doesn't yet understand. Legion stands his ground, clutching the mysterious relic as the green dragon's booming voice echoes through his mind, demanding total submission from the soldier. And the massive, horned entity looms over him, a towering manifestation of ancient power that treats the soldier like a mere pawn in its grand design. The dragon's eyes burn with a condescending fury, clearly insulted that a mortal would dare to mishandle the sacred vessel he considers his own divine anchor. But Legion's grip falters, and the precious object slips from his fingers, tumbling toward the dirt with a sickening, heavy thud that shatters the tension. The green dragon erupts in a screech of pure, unadulterated rage, his massive jaws snapping as he berates the soldier for his unforgivable, clumsy insolence. Legion doesn't hesitate, his combat instincts overriding his fear as he levels his sidearm, ready to trade lead for the dragon's arrogant, booming threats. The beast sneers, his jagged teeth bared in a mocking grin as he dismisses the soldier's weapon as a pathetic, primitive toy that cannot harm him. And he continues to posture, grandly declaring that his current form is the culmination of countless lives, a holy convergence that is far beyond human comprehension. The green dragon looks down with utter disdain, sneering that to a low-level brute like Legion, his true, majestic nature will always remain nothing but an illusion. While the relic rolls across the ground, abandoned and forgotten, as the soldier stares into the face of a god who refuses to be ignored. The green dragon freezes in its tracks, its massive jaws hanging open as the cold, unyielding barrel of a firearm presses directly against its snout. And the beast recoils, its eyes darting in disbelief as it realizes this human isn't cowering in fear, but is actually holding its ground with lethal intent. Legion stands firm, his mask hiding his expression while he grips the relic tightly, his mind reeling from the sudden, disorienting shift in his reality. The scale of the confrontation is absolute, a lone soldier dwarfed by the towering, horned manifestation of a dragon that radiates an aura of ancient, divine malice. The green dragon lets out a low, dangerous hiss, its purple eyes glowing with a mix of irritation and begrudging respect for the human's sheer, suicidal audacity. Legion doesn't blink, his voice cutting through the tension as he demands to know the fate of his comrades and the refugee child he swore to protect. The dragon sneers, its massive form coiling like a spring, as it mocks the soldier for prioritizing such pathetic, mortal concerns over the grand cosmic game at play. Legion remains unmoved by the dragon's arrogance, his finger tightening on the trigger as he refuses to be intimidated by a creature that views him as nothing. The dragon's pupils dilate in a flash of realization, its predatory instincts screaming that this human is far more dangerous and resilient than it ever anticipated. And as the dragon towers over the battlefield, it is forced to acknowledge that this soldier has somehow seized the initiative, standing tall against a god without a single tremor of doubt. Legion stares down the beast, his finger steady on the trigger as he demands to know if the dragon was the one who orchestrated his arrival. But the green dragon scoffs at the accusation, admitting that while he did indeed select the soldier, he lacks the sheer power to manipulate the fabric of reality. The dragon recounts the moment he was cast aside by the gold dragon's dimensional authority, feeling his physical form being torn apart by the raw, chaotic energy. And he describes the agonizing drift through the void, a lonely journey through the dimension of death where he waited for an eternity to be reborn. As his consciousness began to flicker and fade into the darkness, he found himself staring into the vast, empty expanse of a dying existence. Suddenly, a divine notification chimed in his mind, signaling the awakening of a system known as Bixrai that promised him a way to interact with other worlds. The system commanded him to select a breeder, a champion to serve as his anchor, and the dragon's eyes locked onto Laijin with a desperate, hungry intensity. He explains that he was looking for a chosen hero, someone capable of raising him and assisting in his grand, vengeful return to the land of the living. The dragon lunges toward the soldier, his massive jaws agape as he screams that Laijin is the one destined to nurture his power and secure his future. And he compares the soldier's potential to the cool-headed intellect of the blue dragon, insisting that Laijin is the only one who can help him reclaim his throne. The green dragon's eyes burn with a primal intensity as he observes Legion, noting the soldier's fierce, unyielding spirit that mirrors the legendary red dragon. And with a sudden surge of conviction, the dragon realizes that his choice of a breeder was not a mistake, but a stroke of divine genius. Legion stands frozen, his eyes wide behind his mask as the reality of the situation sets in, his mind racing to comprehend the impossible voice. A sharp digital chime rings out across the battlefield, signaling the arrival of a system that bridges the gap between the soldier and the ancient beast. Legion grips his weapon, his knuckles white as he stares at the device, processing the command to utilize the new features of this strange, alien world. The green dragon gasps in awe, his massive form trembling as he recognizes the refreshing, celestial tone of the creator governing the dimensions. Legion stares down at his phone, his brow furrowed in deep concentration as he begins to navigate the interface of this reality-altering system. The dragon roars with newfound purpose, declaring that because the gold dragon has shattered the world's balance, the creator has finally decided to intervene directly. The system prompts Legion to make a critical decision, flashing a notification that demands he select a race to begin his transformation. And before him, the options manifest in a shimmering display of light, offering the path of the human, the dwarf, or the elf to reshape his destiny. The green dragon loses its cool entirely, snapping at Legion with a savage, snarling rejection of any peaceful introspection. And the beast makes its stance crystal clear, shouting that the only good elven warrior is a dead one. While the dragon continues its aggressive rant, insisting that the green will to fight makes the orcs the true warriors of the battlefield. Legion stands there completely bewildered by the sudden, chaotic shift in the conversation, his mind struggling to process the dragon's intense, bloodthirsty logic. And the system chimes in with a cold, mechanical finality, confirming that the orc race has been officially selected for his path. The interface glows with an ethereal light, explaining that because he chose such an uncivilized race, his excess value is being funneled into raw stats. And just like that, his leadership and charisma skyrocket, forcing his taming ability to its absolute breaking point as the system prepares him for the jump. Legion stares at his own hands, trembling as he tries to grasp the meaning of these bizarre, newfound powers. While the green dragon looms over him, holding a glowing egg aloft as he channels his remaining energy into the soldier. And with the final promise that the golden twilight will soon fall to the green dawn, he commands the hero to stand against the pride of the gold dragon. The green dragon looms over Legion, its massive horned form radiating an ancient, desperate authority as it demands the soldier assist in its resurrection. And with a final, booming command, it insists that Legion must take up the mantle to build a green legion that will reshape the world. But the soldier isn't just listening, he is acting, raising his weapon with a lethal, calculated focus as he fires directly into the heart of the divine. The gunfire echoes like thunder, tearing through the ethereal space as the system begins the forced transfer of power, ignoring the dragon's indignant mid-sentence protest. Legion is suddenly ripped from the battlefield, his body plummeting into a dark, suffocating void as he clings to the memory of his simple, nurturing past. He drifts through the abyss, a lone soldier falling into the deep, silent unknown, while the Bixry system begins to rewrite the very laws of his existence. He finds himself suspended in the darkness, his mind flashing back to the quiet, peaceful days of the pet shop, a stark contrast to the violence he just unleashed. He stares into the gloom, his eyes wide with the chilling realization that he has been cast into a new, terrifying reality far beyond the reach of his old life. The sensation of drowning takes hold as he sinks into a vast, oceanic expanse, the system notification confirming that his slime has been successfully tamed and is evolving. And as he drifts, he feeds his K5 pistol into the creature, the warm, damp energy of the evolution wrapping around him as he prepares to be reborn. Legion plummets through the dark, liquid abyss as the system confirms the successful evolution of his slime companion. And the sudden pressure of this transformation forces the air from his lungs, leaving him gasping and choking in the suffocating depths. He breaks the surface of the dark water, collapsing onto the forest floor in a fit of violent, racking coughs. His hands tremble as he reaches out, instinctively searching for the small, familiar presence of his evolved slime. And as he pulls the creature close, the little slime chirps its name, its glowing form illuminating the dark, moonlit woods. Suddenly, a surge of raw, alien energy rips through his nerves, sending him sprawling backward as his very biology begins to warp. He stares at his own hands in absolute disbelief, watching as his skin shifts and his features contort into something entirely new. The moonlight reveals the terrifying change, his face hardening into an orc-like visage with sharp, protruding fangs. He looks up, his eyes wide with panic, as he demands an explanation for the monstrous metamorphosis consuming his humanity. And as he turns to his loyal companion, Dookie stares back with wide, innocent eyes, completely unaware of the chaos unfolding within its master. Legion stands in the shadows of the forest, his body still trembling from the violent transformation as he desperately scans his surroundings for any sign of danger. and his eyes widen in genuine panic when he realizes his tactical gear is missing, leaving him exposed and vulnerable in this hostile, unknown dimension. He spots Dookie nearby, the little slime creature completely oblivious to the tension as it happily munches away on his discarded tactical gloves. Legion stares in disbelief at the sight, his mind racing as he realizes the creature has devoured his equipment, leaving him defenseless against the encroaching threats. He watches the slime with a mix of frustration and growing concern, realizing that the creature's insatiable hunger makes it a dangerous liability in their current situation. He grits his teeth, his mind sharpening as he decides that while the creature is distracted by its meal, he has a fleeting window of opportunity to escape. He lunges forward, his boots striking the earth with a heavy thud as he accidentally kicks a glowing, mysterious egg hidden in the undergrowth. He pauses, his curiosity momentarily overriding his survival instinct as he reaches down to cradle the pulsating, ethereal object in his hands. Dookie looks up from its meal, its large, expressive eyes blinking at the glowing relic while Legion calls out to the creature. And with no time left to waste, Legion turns and sprints into the dark, his breath hitching as he flees the forest with the relic in tow. Legion's eyes widen in absolute shock as a projectile whistles past his face, the sudden, lethal ambush shattering his focus in an instant. And he stumbles back, his heart hammering against his ribs as he realizes he is being hunted by something fast, something deadly, and something entirely unseen. A creature lunges from the shadows with a blade raised high, its movements fluid and predatory as it closes the distance to strike him down. Legion screams for his companion, his voice raw with desperation as he calls out for Dookie to intervene before the blade finds its mark. The little slime responds instantly, its body surging forward like a liquid comet, morphing and twisting with a speed that defies the laws of physics. It wraps around Legion's arm, its gelatinous form hardening and shifting into the cold, familiar steel of a weapon as he desperately reaches out. The transformation is seamless, a masterclass in biological engineering that leaves Legion armed and ready just as the attacker descends upon him. He levels the weapon with a steady, iron-willed gaze, the barrel glowing with the latent, magical energy of his evolved partner as he prepares to fire. The attacker's face is illuminated by the muzzle flash, a look of pure, unadulterated terror crossing its features as it realizes it has made a fatal mistake. And with a thunderous, reality-shaking blast, Legion unleashes a point-blank shot that obliterates the threat, ending the ambush in a blinding, violent flash of light. The moon hangs high over the goblin settlement, casting a cold, silver glow on the forest as the creatures huddle in the shadows. And through the dense canopy, a swift, hooded figure streaks like a phantom, moving with an unnatural grace that defies the stillness of the night. The mysterious intruder lands with a silent, precise impact, her boots barely disturbing the forest floor as she prepares to strike. She stands tall, a formidable elven warrior with sharp, alert eyes, her hand resting on the hilt of her blade as she surveys the goblin camp. Deep within the rocky crags, the goblin villagers whisper in hushed, frantic tones, their voices trembling with the terror of an unseen, encroaching threat. One goblin hangs upside down, its eyes wide with panic as it tries to communicate the danger to its kin, the fear palpable in its guttural, stuttering speech. The entire group of goblins bows low in a display of absolute cowering submission, their bodies trembling as they await the arrival of their overseer. Legion emerges from the darkness, his presence commanding and cold, his mere arrival forcing the terrified goblins into a state of rigid, fearful silence. He fixes them with a piercing, predatory glare, his voice a sharp blade that cuts through the air as he demands total obedience from his subjects. And before him lies the spoils of their labor, a collection of scavenged gear and the glowing, mysterious egg, all laid out as he maintains his iron-fisted control over the forest. The little slime creature Dookie bounces into view, its round, duck-billed face radiating an innocent, wide-eyed curiosity that completely belies the chaos about to unfold. And Legion watches his companion with a sharp, calculating gaze, his orc-like features set in a grim line as he assesses the immediate tactical situation. Suddenly, Dookie erupts into a blur of motion, its gelatinous body spiraling through the air like a streak of blue lightning as it answers its master's silent call. Legion reaches out, his hand snapping forward to catch the shifting mass of the slime as it begins to rapidly reconfigure its very molecular structure. The system interface flares to life, announcing the activation of the Slime Transform protocol as the creature flows over his palm. And in a display of biological mastery, the slime hardens into the cold, lethal frame of a K5 pistol, its surface shimmering with a metallic, otherworldly sheen. The weapon locks into place with a satisfying, mechanical click, its K5 triple-action mechanism primed and ready to deliver a devastating, high-velocity payload. Legion pivots with the grace of a seasoned soldier, his eyes locking onto a goblin archer who has dared to draw a bead on his position. The goblin freezes in sheer, unadulterated terror as it realizes the human has turned the tables, the barrel of the slime gun now staring directly into its soul. And with a thunderous, echoing blast, Legion pulls the trigger, sending a searing bolt of energy straight through the goblin's chest and ending the threat in a spray of sparks. Legion executes a perfect tactical takedown, pinning his opponent to the dirt with a precision that only a veteran of the Third World War could possess. He keeps his weapon trained on the target, his eyes narrowed and his breathing steady as he maintains absolute dominance over the situation. But the adrenaline is still pumping, and he takes a moment to observe the strange, gelatinous form of Dookie as it clings to his hand. He begins to log his findings, meticulously documenting the capabilities of his new companion while the forest remains eerily silent around him. He notes the creature's unique ability to mimic any object it consumes, a bizarre biological trick that could be the key to his survival in this hellscape. However, he realizes the harsh truth that the slime's firepower is pathetic, barely hitting with the force of a rubber bullet. And he scowls at the realization that this weapon is essentially a glorified toy, limited to a handful of shots before it becomes completely useless. Frustrated by the lack of intel, he turns to the Bixrai system, demanding answers about his location and his mission parameters with a sharp, impatient tone. The system responds with a cold, robotic indifference, claiming it has no data to provide, leaving Legion to stare at the screen in disbelief. He clicks the device repeatedly, his jaw set in a grim line as he realizes that in this broken world he is truly on his own. Legion stares at his phone in utter frustration, realizing that even the most basic modern technology has completely failed him in this bizarre, alien landscape. He turns his attention to the mysterious egg, calling out to his loyal slime companion as he tries to make sense of his current, dire predicament. He inspects the relic with a sharp, analytical gaze, his mind racing to connect the dots between his kidnapping and the strange, glowing object in his hand. The green dragon's voice echoes in his memory, a haunting reminder of the grand, cosmic destiny he has been forced into against his own will. He holds the egg aloft, contemplating the heavy burden of being a mercenary for a creature that views him as nothing more than a pawn. Suddenly, he spots a group of goblin villagers cowering nearby and decides to seize the moment, barking out a command to get their attention. The goblins freeze in terror, their wide, panicked eyes darting around as they realize this strange, blue-skinned warrior is demanding answers they cannot possibly provide. Legion presses them for information, his voice sharp and impatient as he desperately asks if they understand a single word of his language. He loses his cool, shouting at the trembling creatures to answer him, but all he gets in return are pathetic, fearful whimpers from the confused natives. He stands back, finally accepting the grim reality that while he might be a powerful breeder, he is completely unable to communicate with the locals of this world. Legion stares at his small slime companion as it clings to the mysterious egg, realizing that nurturing this relic might be his only path forward. But he knows that before he can even think about grand cosmic plans, he has to survive the immediate, brutal reality of his current environment. He understands that overplanning in a situation this volatile is a death sentence, so he shifts his focus entirely to the cold, hard necessity of survival. His primary objective is clear as day, and he knows that securing a defensible base of operations is the only way to keep his head on his shoulders. He prepares to scout the terrain and assess the threats, knowing that hesitation is a luxury he simply cannot afford in this hostile, alien wilderness. A nearby goblin scout lets out a guttural, aggressive cry, raising a jagged rock high above its head as it prepares to launch a desperate, primitive attack. Legion watches the creatures with a predator's eye, realizing that these natives are the most immediate and dangerous threat to his continued existence. He observes the goblins' behavior, noting how they smash the earth with primal fury, their presence a constant, gnawing reminder of the danger lurking in the brush. He inspects the scavenged supplies they left behind, realizing that the presence of rations and bedding proves these scouts are far from their main force. He calls Dookie to his side, his hand steady as he commands the slime to transform into his trusty K5 pistol, ready to turn the tide of this hunt. Legion checks his weapon with a cold, professional focus, knowing the enemy reinforcements are closing in and he has zero time to waste. He realizes that since verbal communication is a total bust, he needs to get creative to force these terrified scouts to spill the beans. He draws a crude, stick-figure diagram on the ground, pointing his finger at the drawings to establish a baseline for his interrogation. He taps his own chest, identifying himself as the primary player in this deadly game of cat and mouse. He then points directly at the goblins, making it crystal clear that he is now focusing his attention on their specific, pathetic little group. He gestures toward the drawings of their settlement, demanding they identify the location of their kin before he loses his remaining patience. He looms over the scouts with an intense, predatory energy, demanding to know exactly where their main force is hiding. The goblins start chattering in their frantic, guttural tongue, their eyes wide as they point toward the distance. They become increasingly agitated, gesturing wildly and shouting as they try to convey the location of their camp to the intimidating warrior. The blue-skinned goblin screams in a sudden burst of terror, finally blurting out the name of their stronghold as the truth is dragged into the light. The goblin scout is absolutely losing its mind, sweat pouring down its face as the cold, unforgiving barrel of the slime gun presses firmly against its temple. And Legion looms over the creature with a look of pure, calculated menace, his eyes glowing with a predatory intensity that demands total, immediate compliance. He leans in close, his fangs bared as he delivers a chilling ultimatum, making it clear that silence is a luxury the goblin can no longer afford. He gestures toward the crude drawing in the dirt, the barrel of his weapon serving as a grim pointer to the fate that awaits if they keep playing games. The two scouts stand trembling before him, trapped in a nightmare of their own making as Legion prepares to send them to an early grave. They finally crack under the pressure, pointing a shaking finger toward the distant ridge to reveal the location of their hidden settlement. Legion narrows his eyes, his hand brushing his hair back as he processes the information, realizing the journey ahead is longer than he initially anticipated. Unbeknownst to him, a mysterious observer watches from the dense foliage, her golden eyes tracking his every move with a silent, lethal curiosity. Legion tosses the goblins a scrap of food as a twisted reward, mocking them for the fact that he is essentially feeding them their own stolen rations. The two scouts huddle together, sniffling and weeping as they hungrily devour the meat, completely broken by the sheer dominance of their new, terrifying captor. Legion stands amidst the glowing aftermath of his taming ritual, his expression shifting from confusion to absolute shock as the system interface pulses with blinding light. And the very air around him crackles with arcane energy, illuminating the forest floor where his discarded gear lies abandoned beside the mysterious, pulsating relic. The Bixrai system floods his vision with a cascade of data, confirming that the Panya tribe goblins have finally been brought to heel through the power of his offering. And with a final, resounding chime, the interface solidifies the connection, binding the creatures to his will as the forest settles into an eerie, expectant silence. Legion stares at his own hands, his mind reeling as the system forcibly injects the knowledge of the demonic language directly into his consciousness. While miles away, the elf scout freezes in the shadows, her eyes widening as she senses a massive, unnatural shift in the magical currents of the dark forest. She doesn't hesitate, her body blurring into motion as she activates a high-speed transit ritual, vanishing from the undergrowth in a flash of brilliant, ethereal light. She reappears in the presence of the elders, her posture rigid and her hand pressed to her forehead as she initiates a direct, telepathic communion with the council. The elders loom over her like towering statues of judgment, their voices resonating with a cold, ancient authority as they demand a report on the anomaly. And she kneels before them, her gaze intense as she delivers the chilling news that a dangerous, unknown orc has emerged on the outskirts of the human village. Legion stands amidst the forest, his newfound power radiating from him as he exerts total control over the goblin tribe. And the creatures cower at his feet, their spirits broken by the overwhelming force of the green dragon's taming magic. Meanwhile, in a distant, ethereal realm, the elders gather in a council of judgment, their voices echoing with the weight of ancient laws. The elf scout kneels before them, her posture rigid as she confirms the terrifying reality of the anomaly they have been tracking. The elders exchange grim looks, their ethereal forms shimmering as they identify the intruder as a threat that defies their understanding. The scout looks up, her eyes wide as she is interrogated about her own standing and age within the hierarchy of their people. She answers with a trembling voice, revealing her century and a half of service, a mere blink in the eyes of the immortal council. One of the elders sighs with a cold, condescending air, lamenting the lack of discipline in the current generation of their kin. The council reaches a final, decisive conclusion, summoning their most elite operative to deal with the orcish threat once and for all. And from the shadows emerges Kalyan Aramalt, the Son of Light, stepping forward with an elegant, lethal grace to accept his new mission. Kalyan Aramalt looms over the scene, his face twisted in a mask of icy disdain as he questions the competence of those failing to keep their subordinates in line. He paces with a lethal, predatory grace, demanding to know how anyone could possibly believe the absurd notion of an orc wielding the power of the green dragon. His voice drips with venomous sarcasm as he threatens to drag them all behind the mother tree for a private, painful lesson in obedience. He gestures with a sharp, dismissive wave of his hand, signaling the ethereal council to leave the messy, mortal details to him. The tension in the room spikes as he turns his cold, red-eyed gaze towards Cilia, his patience for her incompetence wearing dangerously thin. He drops to a crouch, forcing her to meet his intense stare as he acknowledges her bitter, lingering grudge against the dragon that shattered her life. But he quickly cuts through her emotional plea, his tone hardening as he reminds her that the green dragon was utterly erased from existence. He points toward the blinding, residual energy of the past, mocking her for suggesting that such a dead power could ever be wielded by a lowly orc. Celia stammers in a desperate, frantic attempt to defend her report, but Callion cuts her off with a sharp, sweeping motion of his cape. He looms over her one last time, his voice booming with absolute, final authority as he declares her report a failure and orders her immediate dismissal. Celia bows her head in forced submission, her eyes burning with a silent, simmering resentment as she accepts the crushing weight of her superior's dismissal. She drops to her knees in the forest, the physical strain of her frustration manifesting as she clutches her head, feeling the sting of her failure. She slams her fist into the dirt, the ground trembling under the force of her outburst as she curses the stubborn, blind fools who refuse to see the truth. She gasps, her senses suddenly overwhelmed by a familiar, terrifying surge of energy that ripples through the air, confirming the presence of the green dragon's ancient power. She looks up, her expression a mix of agony and defiance as she questions if the words of a crippled elf are truly worth nothing to the council. She grips her arm, the phantom pain of her lost limb flaring as she vows to hunt down the green lizard that shattered her life and left her broken. Her eyes widen with a cold, singular focus, her gaze hardening into a promise of vengeance as she swears to erase the anomaly from this world entirely. Meanwhile, in the wild, a massive, predatory creature lunges from the brush, its jaws snapping shut on its prey in a display of raw, primal violence. Legion watches from the shadows with his goblin scouts, his eyes tracking the beast as it coils its powerful, muscular tail to strike again. He observes the hunt with a calculated, hungry intensity, noting the creature's movements while his goblin companions chatter excitedly about the prospect of fresh, running meat. Legion and his goblin scouts crouch behind a ridge, observing a heavily armored crab beast scuttling through the brush while debating the culinary merits of the creature. Suddenly, a primal bone-chilling howl erupts from the dense foliage, signaling the arrival of a far more dangerous and aggressive predator than they anticipated. A massive, spiked beast lunges into the clearing with terrifying speed, its glowing eyes and razor-sharp claws forcing the group to scramble for cover. The goblins cower in absolute terror, recounting their failed coming-of-age ceremony and the shame of their exile as they tremble before the encroaching monster. Legion stands tall, his transformed features hardened by the harsh reality of this world as he questions the goblins about their tragic, outcast history. The creatures cling to him, their eyes wide with desperate hope as they declare him their master and the savior who will lead them to the green dawn. Legion sighs, his patience wearing thin as he attempts to clarify that he is not their leader, while the goblins remain blissfully oblivious to his rejection. He insists that he is not an alien like them, but the goblins only shout back with renewed fervor, convinced that his demonic transformation proves they are kin. They thrust their hands forward, gesturing wildly at the shared hue of their skin to prove their point, desperate to bridge the gap between them. Legion watches them with a weary, skeptical expression as they continue to insist that all demonic races are united as children of the forest. Legion sits by the flickering campfire under the pale moonlight, his mind drifting away from the immediate danger as he stares at the glowing device in his hands. He recalls the terrifying, prehistoric predators of this world, the dinosaur-like beasts that stalk the shadows with hunger in their eyes. And he considers the armored, crustacean monstrosities that roam the terrain, a constant reminder that in this hostile dimension, death is always lurking just out of sight. He reflects on his past life as a simple pet shop owner, remembering the quiet joy of feeding his animals and the genuine excitement he once felt for the creatures he cared for. A shadow passes over his face as he contemplates how different he was before the apocalypse, back when his world was defined by peace rather than the brutal struggle for survival. The memory of his old life is violently interrupted by the searing image of his home engulfed in flames, a catastrophic event that shattered his reality and forced him into this nightmare. He sees the emergency alert on his phone, a digital death sentence that signaled the end of everything he knew, and his eyes well up with the raw, agonizing pain of that loss. The fire roars in his mind, a consuming hellish inferno that swallowed his past and left him with nothing but the burning desire to scream into the void. He cries out in his memory, a desperate, soul-crushing plea for the destruction to stop, his voice lost in the cacophony of a world tearing itself apart. The vision fades as he snaps back to the present, his boot crushing a dry twig beneath his foot, the sharp sound echoing through the silent, dark forest. Legion's eyes widen in sheer, unadulterated shock as the reality of his situation hits him like a physical blow. And he watches in horror as his loyal slime companion, Dookie, is suddenly snatched away by an unseen, overwhelming force. He scrambles to his feet, his weapon leveled and his heart hammering against his ribs as he screams into the darkness for his partner. The two human scouts stand frozen in the moonlight, their faces pale with terror as they realize they are caught in the middle of a lethal confrontation. Legion's pulse races as he catches sight of the intruders, his mind reeling from the sudden, impossible discovery that he is not alone in this forest. The humans recoil, their voices rising in a panicked, unintelligible babble as they brandish their blades, clearly terrified by the sight of the blue-skinned warrior. He reaches out a hand, his voice strained and desperate as he tries to de-escalate the situation before it spirals into a bloodbath. But his plea is cut short as his own goblin warriors, driven by a primal, savage instinct, surge past him to launch a brutal assault. Legion bellows for them to halt, his authority clashing with their bloodlust as the goblins descend upon the unsuspecting humans with lethal intent. And from the shadows, a swift, ethereal figure streaks through the air, her presence signaling that the true hunt has only just begun. Cilia descends from the canopy like a vengeful spirit, her blade flashing through the night air as she targets the unsuspecting group below. She executes a gravity-defying aerial strike, her leg snapping out with lethal precision to deliver a crushing blow that sends shockwaves through the forest floor. The impact is devastating, a violent collision of steel and force that leaves the surrounding air humming with the residual energy of her assault. She lands with predatory grace, the ground erupting in a spray of dirt and debris as she stands amidst the chaos she just unleashed. Legion watches the sudden arrival with wide, frantic eyes, his mind struggling to process the sheer speed and hostility of this unexpected intruder. The elf scout locks her gaze onto him, her eyes burning with a cold, fanatical hatred as she prepares to deliver her final, damning judgment. She stands tall and imposing, declaring her identity as the striking Fang of Light, a title that carries the weight of her unwavering, lethal devotion. She raises her blade, the steel shimmering with an ethereal glow as she calls out her own name, demanding that her prey acknowledge their executioner. She turns her venomous focus toward Legion and his cowering goblin companions, labeling them as nothing more than wicked, foul-smelling vermin that must be purged. And with a final chilling vow, she invokes the name of the Golden Light, swearing to wipe them from existence before the night is through. Legion stands frozen in the moonlight, his mind reeling as the sheer absurdity of the situation crashes down on him. And he stares across the clearing at the elf scout and her companions, desperately trying to decipher their frantic, alien shouting. He raises his hands in a clear gesture of surrender, his voice strained as he begs for a peaceful resolution to this mounting disaster. But the goblins behind him only add to the chaos, their guttural cries confirming his status as an orc to the already hostile elves. The elf scout's eyes widen in genuine alarm, her blade trembling as she warns her allies that he is preparing a forbidden mind control spell. Legion watches the scene spiral out of control, his frustration mounting as he realizes the language barrier is turning a simple misunderstanding into a death trap. He decides to take command of the situation before it turns lethal, leveling his slime pistol with the intent to fire a warning shot. But as he pulls the trigger, the weapon lets out a hollow metallic click that echoes through the silent, tense forest. His heart drops into his stomach as he realizes the magazine is completely empty, leaving him defenseless and staring at a terrified, weeping Dookie. And in a final, pathetic display of his current predicament, the empty magazine falls from the slime gun, clattering to the ground as his last hope of intimidation vanishes. Cilia's eyes blaze with a fanatical, lethal intensity as she locks onto her target, convinced that she is about to end the threat of the wicked orc shaman forever. She launches herself into the air with terrifying grace, her golden boots flashing in the moonlight as she descends upon Legion like a falling star of judgment. The elven scout closes the distance in a blur, her slender blade drawn and ready to carve through the air, her expression one of absolute cold-blooded determination. A nearby goblin scout watches in paralyzed horror, its wide eyes reflecting the sudden, violent surge of magical energy that crackles from the elf's incoming strike. Legion reacts with the instincts of a veteran soldier, his hand snapping up to intercept the lethal steel as the elf's blade bites into the space between them. Cilia's face contorts in a mask of pure, unadulterated shock, her golden eyes widening as she realizes her perfect ambush has been met with an impossible, iron-willed defense. The tension reaches a breaking point as Legion catches the blade, his transformed, orc-like hand gripping the steel with a strength that defies her expectations. He pivots with a brutal, explosive motion, his body shifting to deliver a counterstrike that catches the elf completely off guard in the heat of the fray. His fist connects with a sickening, heavy thud, the sheer force of the blow slamming into Cilia's midsection and shattering her composure in a single devastating moment. She gasps in agony, her lungs seizing as the reality of her failure crashes down on her, leaving her reeling from the realization that she has severely underestimated her prey. Legion narrowly evades the lethal arc of Cilia's blade, his body twisting through the air as he forces the elven scout to miss her mark. She lands with predatory precision, her boots skidding across the forest floor as she immediately pivots to track her target through the moonlit shadows. Celia's face contorts into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, her voice trembling with the weight of her indignation as she demands to know how he dares to defy her. She screams in a fit of fanatical fury, labeling him a lowly monster and swearing that she will unleash the full extent of her power to see him destroyed. The elf scout begins a rapid incantation, her hands weaving through the air as she calls upon the spirits of the wind to empower her lethal strikes. Legion hits the ground hard, his breath hitching as the adrenaline begins to fade and the cold, stinging reality of his physical condition sets in. He scrambles to maintain his composure, his eyes darting toward his goblin companion as he desperately tries to keep his weapon ready for the next assault. He glances down at his arm, his expression darkening as he realizes his hand is locked in a spasm of agony and refusing to obey his commands. Blood begins to pool from his wound, and he shouts at the terrified goblin to flee, knowing that he is now a liability in this fight. He grits his teeth against the pain, forcing himself to stand as he prepares to buy his companion time by facing the vengeful elf alone. Celia reels back in absolute, stunned disbelief, her eyes wide as she stares at the fresh, dark blood blooming across her side. Legion doesn't give her a second to recover, his own body riddled with wounds as he grips his weapon with a desperate, iron-fisted resolve. The elf scout lunges forward with blinding speed, her blade cutting through the night air while Legion desperately tries to keep his distance. He stares down the barrel of his weapon, his mind racing as he realizes the ammunition is nearly spent, leaving him on the razor's edge of total defeat. He pivots through the grass, his movements sharp and tactical as he attempts to outmaneuver the relentless, high-speed assault of the elven warrior. He keeps his weapon leveled, his eyes darting across the clearing as he searches for a single, decisive opening to end this lethal dance. His focus narrows to a singular point, his gaze locking onto Celia as she prepares to unleash another wave of her devastating, wind-infused strikes. The two combatants circle each other in the moonlight, a tense, silent standoff where one wrong move means certain death for the wounded mercenary. Suddenly, a mysterious, golden relic slips from Celia's grasp during the frantic skirmish, tumbling through the air and landing right in the hands of a nearby, bewildered goblin. The goblin freezes, its eyes bulging as it holds the glowing, ancient artifact, completely unaware that it has just stumbled upon the very object that could change the fate of the entire forest. Legion stumbles back, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror as he realizes the devastating cost of the recent skirmish. And he drops to his knees in the dirt, his movements heavy with the crushing weight of a failure he never saw coming. He stares down at his hands, his breath hitching as he realizes his weapon has been rendered completely useless, the mechanical parts falling away in a pathetic heap. He fumbles with the broken pieces of his sidearm, his fingers trembling as he desperately tries to salvage what remains of his only defense in this hellscape. The goblin warrior creeps forward, its expression shifting from confusion to genuine, gut-wrenching sorrow as it gazes at the mess on the ground. It reaches out with shaking hands, scooping up the liquefied remains of Dookie, the little slime's form now limp and unresponsive in its grasp. The goblin lets out a mournful, high-pitched cry, its heart breaking as it realizes its master's loyal companion has been reduced to a mere puddle of goo. Legion watches the scene unfold, his face pale and his mind spiraling into a dark, hollow place as the reality of his loss fully sets in. The Bixby system flares to life with a blinding, cold light, the interface pulsing with a cruel, robotic notification that triggers a deep-seated, traumatic response. And as the PTSD status effect takes hold, Legion's restraint snaps, his head arching back as the berserker skill erupts from his soul in a violent, crimson tide. The air itself seems to warp as Legion's berserker rage reaches a fever pitch, his silhouette wreathed in a terrifying, crimson aura that leaves the nearby goblin trembling in the dirt. He moves with the speed of a predator, his massive, clawed hand reaching out to snatch the air as he looms over the battlefield like a vengeful demon. The transformation is complete, his physical form surging with raw, unbridled power as he stands tall, his eyes burning with a cold, white light that pierces the darkness. He towers over the fallen elf, his presence so overwhelming that the very atmosphere seems to buckle under the weight of his murderous, focused intent. In a sudden, jarring shift of perspective, the memory of his past life flickers, a quiet, peaceful moment where he once knelt to comfort a simple, harmless turtle. The vision snaps back to the brutal reality of the forest, where he stands over the broken elf, his hand still poised to strike with lethal, calculated precision. His expression is a mask of hollow, jagged rage, his jaw set and his eyes wide with the frantic, disjointed energy of a man pushed beyond his breaking point. He turns his gaze toward the clearing, where a soft, golden light begins to pulse against the gloom, drawing his attention away from the carnage for a fleeting second. There in the center of the grass, the little slime Dookie sits, its round, duck-billed face glowing with a miraculous, shimmering light that defies the surrounding chaos. Legion stands motionless, his berserker aura still crackling around him as he stares down at his companion, the sight of the recovering slime grounding him amidst the madness. The Bixry system interface flares with a blinding, ominous light, projecting a warning that a fatal error has been detected in the immediate vicinity. The digital screen flickers with a distorted, ghostly image of a man, his voice echoing a final, cryptic command to find what one likes and live freely. Dookie, seemingly recovered from its near demise, bounces into the frame with a renewed, vibrant energy, its duck-billed face radiating a strange, newfound confidence. The little creature lets out a chirping sound, its eyes wide as it stares at the glowing, egg-like relic that pulses with an ancient, rhythmic heartbeat. Suddenly, the system activates a hidden protocol, and in a flash of light, Dookie undergoes a rapid biological split, triggering the fission reproduction trait. Legion watches in stunned silence as his single companion multiplies, the small slimes clinging to his shoulders and palms like loyal, gelatinous soldiers. He stares at the creatures with a weary, haunted expression, his orc-like features softening as he realizes he is not as alone as he once feared. In the distance, the elven scout Cilia is violently displaced, her body vanishing from the forest floor as the world around her dissolves into nothingness. She reappears in a desolate, ethereal void, her eyes wide with terror as she scans the horizon, realizing she has been cast out of the mortal realm. She scrambles to her feet, her heart pounding as she vows to find a way back, knowing she must report the anomaly of the orc to the elders at any cost. Cilia frantically clutches at her head, her mind racing with the desperate, singular need to report the existence of the orc shaman to the council. She freezes in sudden, gut-wrenching realization, her fingers trembling as she feels the empty space where her golden tiara once rested. The weight of her loss hits her like a physical blow, her eyes widening in terror as she realizes the symbol of her status has been stripped away. She collapses into herself, her arms wrapping tight around her body as she feels the terrifying, cold void where her connection to the mother tree used to be. For the first time in her century and a half of life, she is completely and utterly isolated, adrift in a world that no longer recognizes her existence. She screams into the darkness, her body shuddering as the remnants of her magical link shatter like glass, leaving her vulnerable and exposed. She flails in the void, her voice cracking as she begs the mother tree and Lord Callion for salvation, but only silence answers her desperate pleas. She grips her own shoulders, tears streaming down her face as the primal fear of abandonment consumes her, leaving her begging for anyone to reach out. Suddenly, the massive, toothy maw of the green dragon looms out of the shadows, snapping shut around her as she shrieks for help one final time. She is pulled into the crushing, inescapable grip of the dragon, her struggle ending as she is held fast by the very entity she sought to destroy. Legion cradles the broken elf in his arms, his expression uncharacteristically soft as he shields her from the harsh, unforgiving reality of the forest. He leans in close, his voice a low, steady anchor meant to pull her back from the brink of her psychological collapse. Cilia looks up at him, her eyes wide and shimmering with a newfound, fragile sense of safety that she hasn't felt in over a century. He sits beneath the twisted trees, offering her a bowl of the medicinal concoction as he patiently guides her toward a state of calm. She stares at the glowing, purple liquid, her mind struggling to process the strange, soothing warmth radiating from the man who was once her enemy. She takes a tentative sip, the liquid washing away the jagged edges of her trauma and allowing her to finally breathe for the first time in years. She gazes at him with wide, questioning eyes, wondering if this mysterious, blue-skinned warrior is a savior or something far more enigmatic. Legion watches her with a calm, steady gaze, his presence acting as a bridge between the light and the dark for the shattered scout. He looks down at her with a gentle, inquisitive tilt of his head, checking to see if the medicine has finally taken hold of her spirit. He glances toward his goblin subordinates, a faint, satisfied smirk playing on his lips as he confirms that their concoction has successfully stabilized his latest recruit. Cilia coughs up the medicinal concoction in a spray of purple mist, her eyes wide with shock as the strange liquid hits her system. And Legion stands firm, his hand still glowing with the residual energy of his technique as he keeps the elf bound in place. She struggles against her restraints, her face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage as she screams for her captor to release her. Legion remains completely unfazed by her outburst, his posture relaxed as he watches the frantic elf thrash about in the dirt. He levels a cold, warning glare at the prisoner, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous register as he demands she learn to behave. Cilia tries to retort, but her mouth snaps shut against her will, her eyes bulging as she realizes she has lost control of her own body. She stares at him in absolute terror, the realization dawning on her that she is trapped under the influence of his high-level body control magic. Legion stands over her with his goblin subordinates, his arms crossed as he contemplates the sheer absurdity of his current situation. The goblins chatter in excitement, praising their master for his incredible ability to dominate such an arrogant and powerful member of the elven race. Legion looks back at them with a bewildered, skeptical expression, genuinely questioning if he really just exerted that much power over her. Legion holds the bowl of questionable, eye-filled sludge, his brow furrowed as he questions his goblin allies about the lethal potential of their concoction. The goblins insist with manic enthusiasm that their herbal brew is the absolute pinnacle of their craft, guaranteeing the results without a hint of doubt. Legion sighs, his expression heavy with a mix of guilt and weary resignation as he prepares to feed the captive elf. He offers the bowl to Celia, his mind clouded by the dark irony that he is nursing her back to health only to eventually finish her off. The system chimes with a cold, digital finality, announcing that the attempt to tame the high-level elf using the crude recovery potion has officially failed. Celia's face contorts as she swallows the strange, purple mixture, her resistance flaring up as her lofty mental strength fights against the foreign influence. The system detects the interference and shifts its strategy, bypassing her mind entirely to initiate a direct, forceful override of her physical body. The arcane energy surges, and with a resounding success, Legion finally binds the elf to his will, gaining the ability to command her movements. He stands back, his arms crossed as he contemplates the bizarre reality of his new power, wondering if this truly counts as taming in the traditional sense. He tests his newfound authority with a simple, sharp command, forcing the elf to sit and stand like a trained beast under his absolute control. Legion looms over the bound elf, his patience wearing thin as he demands answers from the captive who can only respond with muffled, desperate cries. And Celia, trapped and seething, spits out a venomous promise of retribution, calling him a filthy orc shaman while vowing to end his life at any cost. He cuts her off with a single cold word, forcing her to silence as she chokes on her own rage, her face twisting in a mask of pure, unadulterated spite. He stands back, observing the scene with a calculated detachment, finally acknowledging that his taming magic has successfully bent the defiant elf to his absolute will. He stares at his own hands, his mind spiraling into a deep introspective haze as he wonders if this newfound dominance is just another byproduct of his strange, transformed body. And he reflects on the impossible nature of his survival, noting that the grievous wounds he sustained in the recent, brutal skirmish have vanished without a single trace. He recalls the terrifying, fragmented memories of his berserk state, the flashes of raw, inhuman power that surged through him when he lost all sense of self. The haunting image of his past trauma flickers in his mind, a vivid, bloody reminder of the war that shattered his reality and left him with nothing but this lingering, jagged PTSD. He sighs, rubbing his temples as the physical and mental toll of the day catches up to him, blaming the entire chaotic ordeal on the crushing weight of his stress. He sits among his strange, motley crew of goblins and slimes, finally admitting to himself that he is utterly lost in this bizarre, hostile world. Legion stares at his device, the chaos of the world swirling around him as he realizes that despite the madness, his singular mission remains absolute. He grips the phone tight, the image of his past life burning in his mind as he swears to survive and find his way back home. His face contorts into a mask of pure, primal intensity, the word survival echoing in his soul as he prepares to whip his subordinates into shape. He bellows for his motley crew to assemble, his voice cutting through the forest air like a drill sergeant driving his recruits to the brink of collapse. He looms over the trembling goblins and slimes, his eyes burning with a fierce, demanding light as he makes it clear that their loyalty is currently under review. He stares down at his small, terrified army, his expression hardening as he explains that only the strongest will earn the right to stand by his side. He paces before them, his voice booming with the authority of a man who knows that in this hellish dimension, only the ruthless will ever see another sunrise. He drops to the dirt, forcing his companions to join him in a grueling, high-intensity workout that tests the limits of their endurance and their resolve. He watches them struggle, his gaze cold and calculating as he wonders if they are truly capable of being his allies or just disposable meat shields. He grabs his goblin scouts by the shoulders, his grip firm and demanding as he forces them to prove their worthiness to be his right and left hands. Legion dominates the training ground, physically forcing his goblin recruits to sharpen their combat instincts through relentless, high-stakes sparring sessions. He delivers a crushing, decisive blow to a goblin's guard, his eyes burning with the intensity of a drill sergeant who demands nothing less than perfection. Celia watches the display from the sidelines, her composure shattered as she realizes the sheer, terrifying discipline Legion has instilled in these creatures. She is forced to confront the reality that her previous assumptions were dangerously flawed, her mind reeling at the sight of such sophisticated, tactical behavior. Her gaze shifts to the slime Dookie, who effortlessly mimics the complex mechanics of a modern firearm, a feat of transformation that defies all known magical laws. She observes the goblin scouts meticulously maintaining their tactical gear, their movements fluid and coordinated in a way that mocks the primitive nature of their kind. The sight of Legion standing amidst his armed, disciplined squad leaves Celia paralyzed, her worldview crumbling as she recognizes the absolute authority he commands. She reflects on her century and a half of service, a lifetime of rigid order that has never once prepared her for the anomaly of a human leading monsters. She struggles to reconcile the image of a simple, savage monster with the reality of a disciplined soldier, her voice failing as she admits the truth of her observation. She watches in stunned silence as the goblins and their master stand ready, their weapons leveled with a precision that signals the birth of a new, unstoppable force. The air crackles with lethal intensity as projectiles slam into the wooden barricade, leaving the elven scout trembling in the wake of such overwhelming, monstrous firepower. She drops to her knees, her mind reeling from the sheer, terrifying reality of the force she just witnessed, her only thought a desperate, frantic need to warn the council. She scrambles across the forest floor, her eyes wide with panic as she fixates on the golden tiara lying in the dirt, the symbol of her status now a haunting reminder of her failure. Suddenly, the shadows shift and Legion emerges, his presence looming over her like a dark omen as he coldly commands her to step forward and face her judgment. Back in the village, the terrified scouts scream at the top of their lungs, their voices cracking with the desperate, frantic warning that monsters have arrived at their doorstep. They plead with the villagers, their hands gesturing wildly toward the mountain as they demand to know why their dire warnings are being met with such infuriating, blind indifference. The village chief stands unmoved, his expression one of weary, condescending annoyance as he dismisses their frantic claims as nothing more than the ramblings of frightened, delusional men. The scouts are pushed to the brink of madness, their voices rising in a chorus of frustration as they insist that an orc shaman is real and that they witnessed its power firsthand. They beg for the formation of a militia, their eyes darting toward the dark, watchful silhouettes of goblins lurking in the brush, unseen by the arrogant, stubborn elders. The chief scoffs at their absurdity, completely unaware that the very monster they fear is watching them from the shadows, mocking their ignorance as he prepares to strike. Legion stares down from the brush, his eyes cold and calculating as he mocks the absurdity of such powerful beings lurking near a pathetic, insignificant human village. He keeps his goblin scouts and the slime Dookie close, their presence a silent threat as they observe the unsuspecting villagers going about their mundane lives. He turns his gaze toward the captive elf, his voice cutting through the tension as he commands Celia to step forward and face the reality of her situation. Celia bristles with defiance, her face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred as she snaps back at him, refusing to be treated like a common servant. Legion silences her with a single, sharp word, his authority absolute as he forces the prideful elf to swallow her vitriol and submit to his will. The village elders continue their oblivious chatter, completely unaware that their fate is being decided by the very monster they refuse to acknowledge. Legion holds the golden tiara aloft, the artifact shimmering in the light as he taunts the elf with the promise of returning her most precious possession. He dangles the relic before her, his expression unreadable as he offers a deal that hinges on her willingness to cooperate with his demands. He gestures toward his split slime companions, reminding her that her kin are currently held hostage by his bizarre, multifaceted army. He holds up 3 fingers, giving the broken elf a final, terrifying countdown to decide if she will serve him or lose everything she holds dear. Legion holds up 2 fingers, his gaze locked onto the captive elf as he begins the final, agonizing countdown that will decide her fate. The tension snaps as the little slime Dookie lunges forward, its tongue lashing out to snatch the golden tiara from the air with a shimmering, magical display. Celia finally breaks under the immense pressure, her voice trembling as she surrenders to his demands and begs him to begin the process. Legion watches her with a cold, calculating intensity, his mind already dissecting the hatred burning in her eyes as he prepares to break her spirit. The elf scout envisions the distant, ethereal council of her kin, her mind screaming with the promise that their undying, eternal hatred will eventually find him. The village chief dismisses the frantic warnings of the scouts, his voice dripping with arrogance as he insists that dangerous orcs only exist across the sea. The scouts are pushed to the brink of madness, their faces pale with terror as they insist that they have seen the threat with their own eyes. The village chief stares down at them with a look of utter disdain, questioning the very idea of a militia as if it were a ridiculous, childish fantasy. The leader of the road keepers steps into the fray, his expression mockingly hurt as he questions why the villagers would ever doubt his mercenary guild. He stands tall with a smug, self-satisfied grin, declaring that every single corner of the village is already under the iron-fisted protection of the road keepers. The road keepers' leader stands tall, his arrogance radiating as he dismisses the villagers' pleas for weapons, questioning the chaos they would surely invite upon themselves. But the villagers aren't backing down, their voices rising in a desperate, furious confrontation as they call out the mercenaries for the parasitic bandits they truly are. The tension hits a breaking point, and with a sudden, fluid motion, Legion closes the distance, his fist whistling through the air with devastating intent. The impact is absolute, a brutal, bone-jarring strike that connects squarely with the mercenary's jaw, sending shockwaves of pain through his entire skull. The surrounding villagers recoil in sheer, unadulterated panic, their cries of alarm echoing as they witness the sudden, violent escalation of the standoff. Legion doesn't let up, his grip tightening on the mercenary's collar as he looms over him, his eyes burning with a cold, merciless authority. He turns his focus to the suffering villagers, his voice a sharp, commanding edge that cuts through the fear, demanding they recognize the true nature of their oppressors. He signals to his slime companion, Dookie, who stands ready with a weaponized form, prepared to enforce Legion's will with surgical, non-lethal precision. He delivers a final, crushing blow to the mercenary, his movements a blur of tactical efficiency that leaves the bandit leader reeling in total, agonizing defeat. The mercenary hits the ground with a heavy thud, his world spinning as the villagers stare in stunned, wide-eyed silence at the man who just dismantled their nightmare. The village erupts in a cacophony of terror as the unmistakable, bone-chilling roar of the orc shaman tears through the forest, confirming the scout's worst fears. Legion stands amidst the tall grass, his tactical mind already processing the chaos as he checks his sidearm and barks orders at his squad. He directs his goblin warriors to tighten their formation, his voice a steady, authoritative anchor amidst the rising panic of the nearby human settlement. The reconnaissance mission has officially hit its objective, and with the target identified, Legion signals for an immediate, disciplined withdrawal from the area. The orc shaman looms into view, a serpentine nightmare of scales and glowing white eyes that dominates the clearing with its sheer, predatory presence. Legion's goblin scouts move with lethal, synchronized precision, their tactical training kicking in as they identify the beast and prepare to engage. The goblins fan out, their movements fluid and aggressive as they coordinate their positions to draw the shaman's focus away from their master. A goblin warrior executes a perfect, gravity-defying slide, its weapon leveled with cold, calculated intent as it prepares to deliver a precise, punishing strike. The shaman lashes out, but the goblin is already in motion, its finger squeezing the trigger as it demonstrates the lethal efficiency of modern, tactical combat. The beast recoils under the barrage of gunfire, its serpentine form twisting in agony as the goblins apply the advanced, high-speed shooting techniques drilled into them by Legion. The slime Dookie leaps into the fray with a blur of motion, its gelatinous form shifting to knock the firearm from the shaman's grip. The goblin warrior seizes the opening, leveling its own weapon with a steady hand as it prepares to neutralize the serpentine threat. The shaman snaps its jaws shut on the barrel of the gun, the metallic crunch echoing through the clearing as the beast attempts to crush the steel. But the goblin doesn't flinch, its training taking over as it maneuvers around the beast with the grace of a seasoned special forces operative. The goblin strikes with a tactical blade, the edge whistling through the air as it aims for a vital point in the shaman's defenses. The blade connects with a brutal, tearing sound, the shaman reeling back as the goblin's precision strike draws a spray of dark, viscous blood. The goblin pivots, its movements a masterclass in efficiency as it prepares to follow up with a devastating, close-quarters maneuver. The shaman collapses under the relentless assault, its eyes wide with the realization that these small, disciplined creatures are far more dangerous than they appear. The goblin stands over the fallen beast, its posture rigid and professional as it declares the superiority of modern, human-derived combat techniques. Legion watches from a distance, his silhouette framed by the forest as he observes the fruits of his brutal, uncompromising training regimen. Every instructor from civilian, government, military, and police forces stepped up, driven by the singular, desperate conviction to teach conscripted youths how to survive. Whether they were seasoned professionals or raw recruits, because every member of society doing their best in their place was the only way to survive on the battlefield. Survival is the ultimate goal, and with the support and convenience of a civilized society, it all becomes that much easier to manage. Because at the end of the day, we need quality food, shelter, and clothing to keep the machine running. But no matter how tough your body and mind are, if you keep up these sleepless night operations, you are bound to lose combat strength. So Legion pauses to assess the current shape of his fighting power, wondering if they are truly ready to take over a village. The goblins have been hardened by this harsh wilderness, and they have picked up modern combat tactics with a speed that is nothing short of remarkable. The slimes are even more versatile, capable of transforming into 4 tools at once and operating them all, reaching a point where they can fire 25 rounds. And then there is the taming process itself, which requires the specific conditions of proper feeding accompanied by strict hierarchy discipline. And with that final, calculated act of dominance, the creature known as Majorarius has been officially tamed. Legion stands tall in the forest, his hand resting firmly on the head of the newly tamed creature as he officially dubs it Q. He surveys his motley crew of goblins and slimes, his mind sharp as he confirms that he has finally cracked the core conditions for his taming system. He looks down at his tactical device, his expression darkening as he acknowledges that despite his growing army, there is still one critical piece missing from his arsenal. He stares at the blank screen of his phone, his mind racing with the tactical necessity of establishing a long-range communication network to coordinate his forces. He paces through the brush, his brow furrowed as he muses on how a proper comms system would allow him to execute far more complex and lethal maneuvers. He turns his attention toward the captive elf, his tone sharp and demanding as he calls out to her, cutting through the silence of the woods. Celia bristles with indignation, her face twisted in frustration as she reminds him that she has fulfilled every one of his demands and now demands her tiara back. Legion holds the golden artifact up to the light, a faint, mocking smirk playing on his lips as he questions if this is the trinket she is so desperate to reclaim. The elf's eyes widen with a mix of shock and primal longing as she stares at the relic, her composure fracturing under the weight of his psychological pressure. He watches her closely, his gaze piercing as he probes for the truth behind her obsession, wondering why such a simple object has left her so utterly shaken. The chaos of the skirmish settles as Celia watches the disciplined movements of the goblins, her eyes widening in realization that this is no mere brawl. She stares intensely, her mind racing as she processes the tactical precision of the creatures, finally identifying the terrifying truth behind their coordinated, lethal maneuvers. She stands before the orc shaman, her voice trembling as she declares that she must report this organized military threat to the Elf Grand Council immediately. She glances down at the golden tiara, her heart sinking as she realizes the sentimental relic of her late mother is now in the hands of her captor. She lashes out with a desperate, venomous ultimatum, threatening to use the tiara's long-range relay to summon reinforcements and have the shaman's skull crushed for his insolence. The weight of her own words crashes down on her, and she breaks into a fit of frustrated, tearful rage as she realizes her leverage is slipping away. Legion holds the golden artifact up, his expression one of cold, calculating curiosity as he questions the true nature of this long-range hunting relay. He turns the relic over in his hand, his eyes narrowing as he confirms that this simple, shimmering piece of gear is indeed the key to her communication network. He mockingly places the tiara against his own forehead, his smirk deepening as he watches the elf's composure completely shatter in real time. Celia lets out a final, agonizing scream of denial as the reality of her total isolation sets in, watching helplessly as Legion claims her lifeline for his own. Legion and Celia stand back-to-back in a stark, empty void, their opposing silhouettes highlighting the massive divide between the captive scout and her tactical overlord as they prepare for the next phase of their uneasy alliance.